There's no hill we can't climb. There's no mountain too high for us now. There's no reason to hide. Just like the stars. Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Abuse Recovery Success. I'm so excited today to have a guest with us, Christina. She is a writer, a speaker, a blogger, and she's someone that you're going to be really excited to get to know because she has a story much like we all do. And all of us have a different story, but we can find those similarities, and in those similarities, a journey of hope and strength. So without further ado, Christina, welcome to Abuse Recovery Success. How are you today?
So good. I'm really grateful to be here. I think, I'll tell you my story right now, but I got sober during COVID. And so it was, crazy. And so it was like through podcasts like yours and books and like the online community, because AA was pretty much shut down when I got sober. So it was a wild ride, but funny enough, tomorrow will be a year and a half sober for me from alcohol and all the things.
Oh, woohoo!
Yeah,
Congratulations.
Stuff works out. It's crazy, but I can hardly believe it. But so I currently live in Chesapeake, Virginia, which is like south of DC, a couple hours south of DC. My husband is in the Navy, and we are stationed here. And my drinking started, 10 years ago. Well, now 11 and a half years ago. But I was strange. I didn't really drink too much in high school. I grew up in an evangelical Christian background. So kind of, religious, kind of strict, that kind of thing. Didn't really drink in college because that was just not who I was. It's not who I was supposed to be, if that makes sense. I had a kind of a forced reputation to keep.
Mm-hmm.
And then I met my husband at 25 and I moved in with him, and the military are huge drinkers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we lived in Florida as well. So it was just like the beach and it was partying all the time. And I was, Thursday through Sunday, just blacking out, which was normal though, that's I've heard some of your story too. And I think it's like, I'm not alone in that. I think a lot of people, because I remember thinking, oh, I'm fine. You know what? Like, yeah, maybe I puked and blacked out and don't remember how I got home, but like we all did,
Yeah.
So anyway, so that kept happening. I'm 32 now, and that kept happening into my 30s, like early 30s. And my husband would have to come get me at the bars because I'm a butterfly and I'm an extrovert. So I was like hanging at the bars. I'd go to the happy hour, but stay till 2 a.m. And at the very end, I went on like a 2-day bender where like I didn't come home. I don't even remember a lot of it. I was drunk the whole time. Like that had never happened to me before. Right. And, I had gotten a new job that I had really wanted, kind of a pivotal career moment for me. And I showed up intoxicated to the job and high. So yeah. So my husband, when I came home from this bender, was like, Christina, I think you need help, and I was like, I agree with you, And so we made the decision for me to move home to my hometown of Cleveland, Ohio. So I'm originally from Ohio. I moved in with my grandma, who's one of those strange people who's had like one drink in her life and got that bad hangover and was like, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
I know. Can you imagine?
I know.
But yeah, so it was a great environment to move home. My husband, unfortunately was drinking as well, not as problematically as I was, but it just wasn't a good situation. So we didn't legally separate. I just moved home to get sober. I needed to quit my job, just focus on myself, So this was January 2020. Unfortunately, I continued to drink because I remember thinking, oh, I'm going to move and location's going to fix it all.
Yeah.
Like somehow my problems aren't going to travel with me, but they did. So my very low, I was like stealing my grandma's debit card, like all these things, walking in the snow to get alcohol. I mean, all these, it was bad. And so my grandma took my car keys and my debit card. And I gave them willingly, but it was like, that was my low. And my last drink was February 3rd, 2020. I had lied and said I was going to Panera. So she dropped me off at a Panera and I walked, and I love heels. I'm in this like 5-inch heels in a snowstorm, right? Like walking to some Applebee's, some shitty like bar, of course. And this is awful, but I had probably $5, maybe $10 in cash because when I would go to AA, my grandma would drive me and I'd say, hey, I need a couple dollars for the donation basket.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she would give me money and I would
Yeah.
hoard it. And an addict's going to do what they got to do,
Yeah.
right? So I flirted with this guy down the bar to get more drinks. Anyway, my family was tracking me, smart, because I would lie. And my grandma walked into the bar and was like, hey, so kind. It brings me to tears. I was like, do you just want to go home? And I was like, yeah. Like, what the fuck am I doing? Just like looking around, like, where am I? So, I entered treatment the next week, maybe. I did an intensive outpatient and it saved my life because I had to pee in front of other humans, not humans, but a human. That sounded funny, but it was a drug test, right? Every morning. And I just remember being like, this is my low. Like, I'm literally peeing in front of someone because they can't take my word that that I'm not drunk or high, so, but I knew, that first month, oh my gosh, I wanted to drink. I wasn't chemically dependent, but I was headed that way. And it kept me sober. But then the week I got out of treatment, everything shut down. Yeah. So I started just sharing my story on Instagram and in a blog and speaking on podcasts and stuff. And here we are.
Wow. Well, that is so awesome. I mean, it's such a treat, and it is tickling me pink that you are someone that got sober in COVID, because I think so many things happened to all of us in COVID, and, everyone had different reactions, but it's crazy, Christina, because I was super into AA before COVID. And then, during that period of time, I really wasn't very involved. A, we weren't having meetings, but B, I just wasn't really into Zoom, and it didn't do it for me. And this podcast, brings me a lot of peace and is a big part of my recovery. But what I'm getting at is, since I've been back into the rooms just recently, there are so many less people. And, it's a combination of things. It's because of the state of affairs of how we currently are. I think people are still not all the way back into their kind of groove or their routine. But in addition to that, a lot of people went back out during COVID. So it's really a real nice ray of hope that you were able to kind of tackle the beast of addiction in the middle of the pandemic and being home. So there's so many questions that I want to ask you, but I think I'll start first with, my instinct is, if you're saying you're a bar flyer, that was kind of your MO, do you think in some ways for you and your specific relationship with alcohol, it made it easier being stuck at home?
Oh my gosh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yes. Good punch. And to circle back to what you said really quick, my first sponsor ever relapsed.
Oh,
I had her I know. Because I'm just saying, it was the same thing that you said, like hardcore AA. Like, I went to her house multiple times. She had multiple sponsees, all the things. I mean, she changed my life. She's the one that helped get me over that hump because, I was in and out of the rooms, as they say, I was still drinking. And I remember one day she sat me down and she was like, what are you doing here? And I was like, excuse me? And she's like, you're still drinking. Like, do you want to get sober or not? And in Cleveland, Ohio, Northeast Ohio is where like AA was formed. So they're just like, they are like on it. Anyway, but she saved my life. But she relapsed after like a month of working with me because she needed that physical like rooms and stuff like that. So, that was motivating to me though. I got another sponsor, but like, it was like, she had 10 years of sobriety. Just out the door. That's
the biggest thing. Like, hey, like there should be no arrogance in this, like we're all one drink away from a relapse. And then most of us know that a relapse starts far before we even take that first drink. It starts in the mind, and it's being able to, protect against that. Well, let's talk a little before we dive into maybe talking about that. Let's talk a little bit more about, so gosh, the shutdown happens, your weekend. Tell us more about like, what did you start doing at home? Because maybe one of the listeners is somebody that is more of an introvert, and maybe they're not going to want to go to a meeting anyway. So what were some things you started chipping away at to get you back, into sobriety?
Yeah, absolutely. So, to answer, and then your other question was, it was easier because I was a barfly. So for me, and I hate saying that, I always like to hold space for companies and because that was people's lives, like restaurant industry and everything. But yeah, I mean, at first it was because nothing was open. Literally nothing was open. So for me, it was like those first couple months got me through that hump, those 90 days of you're in recovery. So I'm sure those 90 days, how difficult they can be. But I will say, I just at a month sober, I just shared. Like I was just open, and I had been sharing about my mental health. I have bipolar and anxiety. And I'd been sharing about that openly, but not alcohol. I listened to the podcast you did with, I think it was Corey. He's like an ultra marathon, or he did the ultra. And I really related to him because, he's like, not Corey, or, not me. And that's how I was. I was just like, that Midwest girl, got the good grades, never drank in high school, I drank in college, but not, and it was a secret, right? So for me, it was that everyone was more shocked about it was harder to talk about addiction than it was to talk about mental illness for me, because that felt like a moral failing,
Yeah.
So in a month I came out, and I mean, gosh, I was overwhelmed with messages of family members who were struggling, or with a loved one, or people that were struggling, but yeah, so diving into the Instagram community, I know it sounds weird, but like, I just think I followed so many social media people that were like social, that were sober. So that helped. I read 2 amazing books. I'm sure you're in recovery, but Quit Like a Woman, Holly Whitaker, and then We Are the Luckiest by Laura McKowen. And Laura McKowen did free meetings in the beginning of the pandemic of We Are the Luckiest. There's support meetings for anyone, whatever kind of recovery. And I did that. And then I did her paid version. I haven't done those in a while. Just because I'm looking at different, I think, as sobriety goes on, you go through different phases, right? Like anything. So I kind of phased out of that, but I did podcasts, books, and then I also did Tempest. That is Holly Whitaker's company. She did like a 6-week intensive online course for, if you want to stay sober, if you're curious. So I utilized all the sober online things I could find.
Well, I don't know. I never say this right, but I've always heard, my sponsor said it, I've heard it in the rooms, but I've always heard like, we spend so much time drinking or hunting that. Like, and if you're a listener, it's your drug of choice, like spend so much time acquiring the drug or the alcohol, like making sure you had it, getting drunk, getting fucked up. Like, how much time are you willing to spend on recovering? And I mean, that gives me goosebumps every time, but I had to just dive in. And, I love hearing that you were able to do that basically from home. And I think people don't understand that maybe in the beginning. We can't just necessarily just throw 5-10 minutes at it. I had to kind of have a barrage of that coming at me and the community of it. So tell me a little bit more, because you touched on it in the beginning, the whole thing with the husband and the drinking and the stuff. So are you still with the husband? Is he sober now? How do you balance that?
I love that question. So he is sober. And we met in San Diego when we were drinking, and we were drunk the whole weekend. And, I think that's typical in your 20s, your mid 20s. And we've been married 5 and then together like 9. And we drank through all of it except for this last year and a half. And he doesn't identify as an alcoholic. I don't think he is either, but labels don't matter as much to me. I identify as one. It helps me, know that I can never have one. Yeah. So he quit drinking when I started back in January 2020, but was drinking while I was gone, getting sober myself and kind of hiding it from me. And so we had to work through that. That was complicated. I moved home in October. I moved home to Virginia where he is, in like October 2020, and he has stopped drinking since then. So, I mean, it's, I really believe people have to do it for themselves. You know what I mean? Yeah. It has to be.
I totally agree. But I feel that's wonderful. And I do feel like, and everyone's different. I have a lot of friends in recovery that they're married to people that drink here and there, and we call them normies, whatever. Your journey's your journey. And I'm still in the middle of my journey, but I do believe my preference would be to be with someone that is sober. And Christina, I think of it like, if I have to handle life on life's terms and not tap out, not medicate, I'd like a partner that does the same. And also,
Right.
the whole social surroundings of alcohol and it being a focal point on a weekend just really wouldn't fly with me. So I'm really so happy to hear that you have that support at home. Let's talk to the listeners a little bit about how you being sober has maybe changed or affected your family, your friendships, your relationships, and your marriage.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, it made everyone happier and they could sleep better because I was a mess. I was that one that was out till 2, wasn't going to come home. Did I come home?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Who knows? Luck of the draw, depending on the night. At the end, it was that bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's strange. My family doesn't drink. They just don't, never have. So I was that odd ball that just picked it up. I think trauma, in past. So who knows why I picked it up, but I did. But yeah, everything is so much better. People trust me now. It's like, what the heck is that?
Yeah.
It's like, imagine that, my husband now, he doesn't even think twice when I say I'm going to the coffee shop because that was my big, coffee. It was the bar, and so, now, he used to call me at 7 and of course he'd already know I'd had 3 or 4 drinks or whatever, whereas now it's just like, if I'm running late, I text him, he's already asleep, like, gosh, you waited for me, but he doesn't think about it anymore, which is a blessing of sobriety. So everything is better. Everything.
It's funny you said that because I have that experience too. And even the other night, I had went out and my daughter used to worry about me when I was an active, use of alcohol. And I was trying to call her after and she didn't answer. And I was like, that's great that you just trust me so much now, weird, but totally cool. Right. And I'm happy about it. So that really resonates with me. So Christina, tell the listener that's listening to us talk and chat and laugh right now and thinking, how do I get sober? How did she even do it in the middle of that pandemic? And maybe there's somebody that started drinking more in the pandemic and hadn't had an issue before. What would you want to put into them, almost transport into them for knowledge or strength? What would that be?
Yeah, well, you're definitely right. I think that's why I got passionate about sharing my stories. I have known the numbers, but they were up exponentially. The amount of deaths, the amount of women specifically that are drinking. And, I remember going to AA before the pandemic. And I remember I met a girl that looked and sounded just like me. And she had a month sober. And I was like, I remember bursting into tears. Like, I can't do that. You know what I mean? How are you doing that? And I would say it's cheesy, but it's I literally am the most average person ever. There's always hope. And I always like to preface it to say too, because we do talk about our numbers, I have a year and a half, but I tried for 2 years to get sober. So it wasn't I just had this light bulb moment where it was yep, yay, now I'm sober for a year and a half. I relapsed many times in between then. I had many, many day ones. So I would just say that you have to believe that it is possible. You don't even have to know how you're going to make it happen. You know what I mean? I didn't fucking have a plan. I didn't know. I was I don't know what I'm doing, but I wish I could say the magic of why February 3rd was my last drink. I think it was a culmination of things. But, I think if you can just, in AA, we say one day at a time. Well, for me, I had to take it down to 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time. Yeah. So it's and I would say leaning into an online community, if you can get Instagram and TikTok, man, I freak both. All my feeds are curated to sobriety and recovery. And it's a dose of positivity and reminding myself of this amazing community. So, I think those are huge, huge things that I did. So.
Yeah. I love that. And, I have this tattoo and it has a date 11/16/15. And that's when my real journey into sobriety started. That was the first day I went to rehab, but I relapsed after that. And so it is exactly what you said. Sometimes when people are listening and they think, how am I going to get 1 hour, one day? Sometimes you don't get it right on the first try. And there are people that do, and that's so beautiful. And I still remember being in rehab and being so off put by all the talk about relapse because I thought, don't put that on me. I'm not going to relapse. But some of us, it is a part of our story. A lot of us, it is a part of our story. And I think, exactly what you said, like just wrapping your mind around it might be possible. I don't have a plan. I don't know how, but putting that one foot in front of the other is so important. So Christina, tell us a little bit about what you do to stay grounded now. Like, are you going to AA meetings? Are things opening up? Or are you what are you doing other than sharing your story?
Yeah. So I haven't been to AA in a while, to be honest, because I moved back here and then nothing was open. So
yeah.
I had a community up there in Cleveland, and then now I'm here and I'm like, great. Yeah. Like, where do I, and I'm like you, I'm not crazy about Zoom. I just feel like it's a very hard way to meet people, and I get distracted, to be honest. I'll turn off my camera and just play on my phone because I don't have that accountability of humans. Sure. You would never do that in a real meeting, but we're all doing it. At least I was. Yeah. So not that, but I am, I'm in therapy, and then I do constant self-care. Like I've ratcheted self-care up here. It's like, I almost feel guilty about it. And it's this weird thing that I'm working through, where I'm just doing less. Like I do as much as I need to, work the things, but I meditate every day, and I just signed up to do a half marathon because I'm a runner.
Awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's the first one I've done since getting sober. I used to be a distance runner, but being hungover or drunk doesn't really allow you to work out.
Yeah. I like self-care too. And, I'm actually the queen of massages. And you know what? Hey, it's better than me going to a bar and having a drink. And so you need to work through that guilt. Because a big part of me being able to stay who I am right now today, and I'm finally the woman I wanted to be, is taking care of myself. And I think that is so important. So I love hearing that your self-care is important to you. And I think that's for the listeners too, because, you mentioned earlier women drinking more and all of that, especially in COVID and the homeschooling. If you're a mom, if you're a woman and you're stuck right now and you feel like maybe you've been drinking too much or you're trying to get sober, abstain, self-care is part of that journey. So I love, you're the first person in a while that's really touched on that. And I love that you're doing it. So before we part, my dear, can you tell the listeners a little bit about, who you are today? What makes Christina, Christina? And then since you are out there sharing in the community, how can they find you if they want to get a little bit of your inspiration?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So, I don't know if you went through this, but I am more myself now than I ever was when I was drinking. I used to think I was funnier, or I think you had mentioned in that interview, or I've been listening to your podcast where you're like, everyone thinks they're so funny. And I'm like, anyway, so I think because I spent 10 years numbing, I didn't even know myself. When I tell you at 32, I'm finally coming into who I am, which is, I would say, just kind. I'm a kind, joyful person, on a journey to heal myself and then hopefully heal the world. Today I actually just applied to grad school. So I want to be Thank you. Yeah, I want to be a therapist and get my master's in therapy. And I wouldn't have known that until I got sober. I wouldn't wish my drinking history on anyone. I've hurt a lot of people, but I'm also going to be able to help a lot of people. So I would say today I am happy for the most part. I'm human, Yeah. And then you can find me. Yeah. So Instagram's kind of my main, hub where everything lives. It's just C and then Kimbrough 1. And then my website, just a blog, ChristinaKimbrough.com.
I love it. Well, thank you, Christina, for being a guest on Abuse Recovery Success. Your story will brighten up anyone's day, and I think give us all strength in such kind of a weird time that we've all been through. And to know someone that's strong enough to do what you've done, I applaud you. Guys, thank you for joining us for another episode of Abuse Recovery Success. You can find us at abuserecoverysuccess.com. You can find videos of this YouTube podcast on April Hill. And then you can also find us at April_the Hills on both TikTok and Instagram. Thank you guys. Have a great day.